Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie. And I got her to the house and Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie, Teddy Queenie. Where's Teddy Queenie? My mother said, well, Teddy Queenie is not here. I sent him to your Tante Sally in New Jersey. And I had a feeling that something was wrong here and she wasn't really telling me the truth. Then years later, I found out when I went to visit my Tante Sally in New Jersey in Union City, I asked her if she had taken care of my little puppy, and she said, I don't know what you're talking about. So there went the trust between me and my mother. I graduated from Queen Anne Elementary School, and then still at the age of 12, I went to junior high, John Burroughs Junior High School. And my class and I went to visit the Vincent van Gogh exhibition. It was a big retrospective at LACMA at its original location, which was by the Natural History Museum in Exposition Park. And seeing that show just blew me away. It was just so gorgeous, and it was like a religious experience for me. I was really deeply impacted by it, so much so that I brought my parents with me to come and see it again. And they just didn't understand what I was talking about, and they were so pissed at me for bringing them. So it was a huge disappointment, but that show really left its mark upon me. Then when I was 13, I met a schoolmate named Ron, who introduced me to his father, who was a filmmaker, a director and producer. And my mother and I were invited to watch him make a film called Skydivers. Then I was invited to shoot a short film called Chased by Aliens. And I was picked up at my apartment, at my parents' apartment, and I was driven to a location on the beach where I had to run back and forth, pretending that I was being chased by aliens. Then the director called Greg, and I sat down on the sand and stared out at the ocean. And then the director sat next to me. And he took his hand and shoved it onto my flat chest. I pushed his hand away, and I flashed back to when I was 4 years old, running down the street to look for my mother at my aunt's house. Well, I got there, but I looked in the window first, and my mom, my aunt, and a fellow Holocaust survivor were sitting on the couch with their blouses and bras off, and they had these huge fatty breasts, and they were poking themselves. And my aunt said, "Who has the biggest breasts? I have the biggest breasts." And then my mother said, "No, I have the biggest ones." And then the lady said, "No, I have." This was over lunch. I ran home and I prayed to God in French, "S'il vous plaît, mon Dieu, me donnerez-moi une grosse poitrine quand je grandis. Please, God, don't give me huge breasts when I grow up." Back to the present. The director took his big sweaty hand and shoved it right onto my crotch, and I pushed his hand away, and I said, "You touch me again and I'll scream." And he said, "Break's over." When I was 17, I went with my mother to see the Kinghouse exhibition. It was a big retrospective at LACMA, its new location. And I was underage, and I had to show my ID. And the guard wouldn't let me see the backseat Dodge. But I got to see the abortion room and the other installations, and it really gave me nightmares, but it was really so spectacular that it was then that I decided, seeing the Van Gogh show and seeing the Ed Kinghouse, that I really wanted to be a serious artist. I wanted to paint like Van Gogh and make installations like Ed Kinghouse. But anyway, when I was 20, I lived in Topanga Canyon and met George Hansen and Wallace Berman, and they became my first mentors and encouraged me to start exhibiting my work. Well, the first pieces that I made were on cowhide, and they were beaded, started with feathers and embroidery, and then I started moving into making fabric collages with sequins and beads and satin and velvet and embroidery very intensely, and getting a lot of commissions, but it was really hurting my eyesight and giving me carpal tunnel really bad. So I met Al Hansen, who was a Fluxus artist, and he could see that I was in pain. So he told me about the Fluxus movement and then encouraged me to start making assemblage and collage pieces with my vinyl materials, and then I made a transition from working only with fabric because I wanted to get into making work more seriously, and I started doing Hollywood images and pop stars from the 50s and 60s. So anyway, I started showing my work and was in the LACMA downtown exhibitions and on Robertson Boulevard. And I showed my Dolores Hart piece, which was an installation, and also I was in humor and art, and those are documented in the Smithsonian, which is really nice. Anyway, I started going back to New York City, and I met Ivan Karp, who was looking at artists' works on Tuesdays. And so I bravely brought my slides with me and my resume, and he looked and he said, well, your work is very exotic, but it's too exotic for me, so I'm going to introduce you to Monique Knowlton, who I think will like your work much better. And so I met Monique Knowlton, and she introduced me to Lutze, was a German private agent, an art agent from Berlin. And then Lutze introduced me to Monique Knowlton. So Monique put me into the New Talent exhibition for that summer of 1980. There was a Picasso retrospective that was really incredible at MoMA, and I went with a friend to see it. We saw it twice, and then we hailed a cab to go to the opening. But it was really heavy traffic, and it was rush hour, and it was pouring rain. And by the time we got to the opening, we looked like drowned rats. So anyway, I took a break and had a little seat, and then one of Lutz's friends sat down next to me, and she had a coterie of artist friends from Germany that were constantly coming over, and she had a nice collection of William Copley's paintings and Gordon Matta Clark, who was showing at the Whitney Museum at the time. And then she had a big series of my works from the 70s also, all in her apartment, but she had a really heavy drinking problem and was constantly drunk. So one of her friends was at the opening supposedly supporting me, and then he said, well, he sat down next to me and he said that he told me that he had a nice house in the south of France and he wanted me to come and visit him. By the way, I really hate Jews. So that really kind of shook me, and so I didn't say anything, but I got away from him, and it was kind of freaky. I was getting ready to go back to LA, but I had sent slides of my early Maryland collages, drawing collages, to Andy Warhol at the factory from Los Angeles, and he sent me back a note with the slide saying, oh, I really like these, come and visit me at the factory when you're in New York. So this other friend of mine talked me into looking for his phone number in the Yellow Pages, and it was listed, and I called one night just out of the blue, and I dialed the number, and I picked up the receiver, and I said, hello, can I please speak to Andy Warhol? Speaking. He was really nice and very not stuck up. He was a very nice person, down to earth, and he invited me to come and visit him at the factory. And then but I had to leave, so I wasn't able to follow through, which was really frustrating for me.